Good afternoon, and thank you for joining me today. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy day to come and get educated. Now, today, my name is Bill Brayton. I'm the ATRA Senior Research Technician for your host today for our 6T40 internal part one of a two-part series. I started this webinar to be a full-on internal, put me together, take me apart, put me back together type of session, and that was going to be too long, so we had to split it into two parts. All right, let's see here. Today's presentation by Transtech Gasket Sets, and we got a short video here for you.
They've been reliable, they've been dependable over the years. If there is a problem, it comes back. If we look at it, typically it's not because of a seal problem or anything like that. They're as close to OEMs that we've seen. It's a good product.
When I was being taught to rebuild automatic transmissions years ago, we were not allowed to use any other kits other than a Transtech kit.
Just in their research and development and the testing they do on the different lip seals and the type of material that they use is far better than other brands.
There really is no comparison. Instruction inserts on the bench, properly cut and fitting seals. When it comes time to assemble the transmission, every gasket and seal is in that kit and they fit properly, and that's profitable.
But we've been using them since I started in the business, and we have no problems.
I use Transtech kits because we need our transmissions to work properly for thousands of miles long after the warranties run out.
Since Freudenberg come on board with Corteco, it's been like day and night, because all of a sudden we had components that we could trust right from the start. If there was a problem, you could call and you could talk to someone and they would take care of the problem for you.
Okay, now moving right along, here is the calendar of our upcoming webinars. Quite a diverse selection for you guys to get trained on. Looking forward to having you guys attend throughout the year. We've got 2, 3 times a month throughout the year. July 5th is going to be part 2 of this two-part series, where we'll cover assembly and common failures for you guys to look out for. Lots of opportunities to get trained. Speaking about opportunities to get trained, we always have a great technical program at Powertrain Expo. This year, Expo 2016, we have a change of venues where we'll be at Paris in Las Vegas this year, October 27th to the 30th. So be sure and put that on your calendar so you can attend that great event. Okay, as always, any questions or comments, please email us to webinars@atra.com. And of course, if you have any questions throughout the presentation, please feel free to type them into the text box at any time, and we'll get those questions answered straight away. You should already have your handout. You received a link for you to click on to get the Adobe file. All right, and you can also get on a list to be emailed automatically for the future webinars, so that you can plan your day around those events. And of course, you can always invite a friend as well. Okay, let's get started here with the 1640 identification. Here's a tag and the tag and all its explanations, so we know what goes where. And because we know that the first letter here is the year, so this would be this in this picture right here on the right would be an 08, a very early model. On the unit on the left, you could see it's a two. So this is a 2012 unit, and this is going to be a generation 2 unit, which I will be talking about throughout the presentation. So here's the clutch apply chart for the 6T40, and the thing I really like about this clutch apply chart, it applies to the 6T40, 45, 50, and its bigger brother, their bigger brother, the 6T70. And throughout those models, the clutches all have the same name, and the great part about it is that they're now called the 1, 2, 3, 4 clutch, so you know when the clutch is applied. For example, 2-6 clutch, 2nd and 6th gear. So it makes diagnosis a lot easier. This also has a low and reverse clutch to back up the L&R sprag, and as the vehicle speed increases, the clutch will be released before the next shift, so it's not actually a shifting clutch like other transmissions, but it can come off as the computer sees fit. And also what there is to know is that this applies for the 6FF series from Ford, since this was a collaborative transmission between GM and Ford, except for the fact that the 6F series 35 calls the 1, 2, 3, 4 clutch the forward clutch, and the 2-6 clutch, for example, is the intermediate clutch. So they give a different notation to the names of the clutches, and through both sets of 6-speeds front-wheel drives, they all work and apply chart identically the same. The key differences between the 6T40 and the 6T45, the 6T45 has the 1.25" wide chain and gears versus the 6T40, which is only a 1-inch setup. The 6T45 has 5 pinion planets, where the 6T40 only has 4. And the 6T45 is slightly larger and has a heavier rib case for more torque capacity. There's just a few parts that will interchange with these units, not many at all. Sealing rings come to mind. That's about it, and you'll be seeing that here in a minute. And as I said, all these 6-speeds, whether it's Ford or GM, they all work exactly the same. The apply chart's exactly the same for all of them. So we'll get used to it, and you'll know it just like no problem at all. The major difference between the GM and the Ford units, of course, is the computer is internal on the GM, where it's external on the Ford. So let's take a look at the inside of this unit. We've got a plastic side cover with a molded O-ring, which we can toss because the new one comes in the kit. And of course, we are going to remove the TECM. Actually, we're going to remove the TCM first. Technically, the TECM is the valve body and the computer all in one unit. So we're going to take the TCM off first to get this apart. Of course, we're going to unplug the speed sensors and the MLP prior to removing the unit. We got 15 bolts here that we're going to remove, various sizes. And now you can see we've got the TECM on the right separated, the TCM and the solenoid separated from the valve body. And here's one of the first telltales of the Gen 2 series. The Gen 2, by the way, started in 2012. As I said prior, these units first came out in the 2008 Malibu. this particular unit that we're looking at right now is a 2012 Malibu with a 2.4 liter. And one of the telltales here is you can see on our solenoid filter plate, we've only got 3 passages with filter plates. On the Gen 1 series filter plates, all of these passages, except these angled passages where the pressure switch goes, have solenoid screens in them. So the Gen 2, you know you have a Gen 2 and you've got only 3 screens here in the middle. And this, excuse me, and this could be discarded because the filter plate comes in the kit. Okay, now that we've got that removed, we've got a control solenoid support ring, which fits tabs into the aluminum body up here in the upper right. And we have an AT level control valve thing. This big tall thing runs up the side, inside of the trans, and it plugs in down here. Now, on the right, this is a crucial element here, and I'm going to explain here why in just a second. On the right, we can see it's in its cold mode or closed. You can see that the flapper valve is up against the housing here. And on the left, the element has warmed up, and now the flapper's open to equalize the fluid within the unit. Okay, this becomes a huge point, and so I'd like to have a word with you about fluid level checking on this unit and why it's so critical. That today's fluid has to be checked. It's a synthetic Deck 6 that has to be checked at a certain temperature because of its expansion and contraction, at how much it expands at a certain temperature. Okay, this is pulled, as I said, this is pulled from the 2012 Chevy Malibu factory manual for a 2.4 liter. And we're going to check the level and the condition. And if you call in and ask me what fluid this takes, I'm going to tell you it takes Deck 6. That's all it takes. If you want to play around with a different fluid that you choose to do so at your own peril. Because if you ask us what fluid it takes and what can you put in it, we will always tell you Deck 6. All right, first of all, to get it started, we want to make sure there's enough fluid to safely run the vehicle. With this thing at room temperature, the fluid should just run out of the inspection port, which I'll show you here in a minute. Okay, now that's all said and done, we're going to start it up, and we're going to put it through its, put the manual lever through its ranges, and then back up into park, and we're going to let it sit for about 3 minutes at idle to give the fluid a time to stabilize and have any foaming dissipate. So if it's not reading the correct temperature, we need to either cool it off or heat it up. Okay, here in the note it says to drive it in second gear. I don't think that that's super critical. If you want to drive it, you know, run it through the gears on the rack there and get it up to the temperature, which is 85 to 95 degrees Celsius, 185 to 2,000 degrees to 200, not 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. So if it's not that, if it's not that, you're either going to have to heat it up or it off to make sure it's right there. Because if you take it to if you fill it up on the high side where the fluid's all expanded, it'll be, you might have it underfilled, or if it's too cool, you might overfill the transmission. And overfilling this unit is about one of the worst things that you can do to it, because what happens is, number one, it might vent. Number two, it will foam the fluid up and start cavitating. And what happens then is it loses its ability to cool, and these units have been known to seriously overheat the fluid very quickly because they're overfilled. Now, a quick story about why this is so important. Just last week before last, a good friend of mine called me up and he said, hey, you know, I got the 6040 out on the bench, and I don't see anything wrong with it. And well, what was the problem? And he says, well, it wasn't moving. Oh, okay. So was it full of fluid? He goes, yeah, we pulled the oil level plug out and fluid drained out, and put the plug back in, and it was full of fluid, and the thing just didn't move. And I said, oh, really? I said, what temperature was the fluid at? And he said, I don't know. And I said, that's bad. He asked the R&R guy, what was the temperature? And he said he wasn't sure. And so I went through the conversation about the temperature and all of that. And he went, and I told him, I said, look, man, I think you might have had a transmission that was just low on fluid, because you've obviously got it apart and you can't see anything wrong. So he goes over and he talks to the R&R mechanic and asks him if there was any leaks, and he said, sure enough, there was a cooler line leak on this vehicle. So the moral of the story here is, this isn't pull the stick, wipe the stick, put the stick back in, and check the fluid type of situation. We've got to follow these instructions to the letter, or we're either going to overfill it, burn it up, underfill it, burn it up. It just has to be done in such a way that it's correct. And of course, when we're checking the level, we're also checking the condition. Red or dark brown, pretty normal. Obviously, if it's black or burnt, it's stinking up the shop, we've got a situation there. And then cloudy or milky is an indication that the cooling system needs to be, the engine cooling system needs to be inspected carefully. And then lastly, if applicable, reset the transmission oil life monitor with your capable scan tool. All right, let's keep going here. We're going to take the valve body off. This has one bolt that comes in from the other side that holds the halves together, so you have to worry about the halves falling apart. Real important here on the right-hand side, it shows a close-up of the roller, detent roller, being indexed into the MLP. Now, it's possible, if you get a little careless, get a little bit of a hurry, to bolt the detent spring on with the MLP moved to the left in this picture. And it will contact, and it won't break the switch. It'll contact the rooster cone, and it'll click, click, click through the gears like it's supposed to. But what will happen is the MLP readings will be off, and you'll run into engagement issues. So be very careful when installing that it's indexed into the switch correctly. Okay, here's our input and output speed sensors, our piston housing seals that are replaced, the parts come in the case, and a word about our separator plate. This part number is not in your handout. So please take a moment to jot this down in your handout. Part number for this is a GM part number 24267597. Now, the reason I bring this up is because some of your kits might not have two gaskets in them. I am told by my buddy at Transtech, Tim at Transtech, that they do have them available. They are just getting them out in kits right now. Obviously, this is from a 2012, so they're close to being, right on the cusp of coming out of warranty. So you will need to change the gaskets, and they do have them available from Transtech. And if you're just replacing the separator plate, it costs about $10 from the dealer. So they had them in stock in the warehouse. I got the separator plate the next day. Problem is, when you split the valve body halves, you have to get together a set of gaskets, because the gaskets are not available from the dealership for the separator plate and the valve body, which, by the way, we'll be seeing in part 2 on July 5th. But You can get that separator plate from the dealer. The problem is that it comes with a free valve body. So we're going to split the case. Unlike this Ford's counterpart, this case and the bell housing has a gasket. It has a gasket, whereas the 6F35 has a liquid sealing silicone type compound, which is very, very difficult to split the cases. That's why we point out the pry points right here for you, so we can split these cases. So here we have the bell housing off. To show you a few highlights here, we've got some case seals that are renewed when we go back together here. This seal right here seals the chain oil scoop / snubber, which I'll show you here in just a minute. Notice that they've got another hole here. It's got actually 2 alignment dowels or holes in the filter snubber that go right here. This plastic piece, we've seen this is the we've seen the oil baffle here. Excuse me. And the pink side, both of these, when the transmissions are overfilled, the units will get so hot that it will melt these 2 pieces of plastic and even melt the filter. So another difference between the 6F30 and the 6T40 is the 6T40 has the support bearing on the outside of the diff, whereas the 6F has it on this area right here. And notice this bushing surface, this journal right here, there's a very large bushing here that this is going to ride, and it's going to be very critical when it comes to axle seal support, so inspect that very carefully. We've got 8 bolts here to remove the pump out after we've taken the baffle out. The ring gear can stay in the case. The pump will come out with the filter will come out with the pump. Very critical that you take the time, pull these valves out, and inspect for wear. If there's any scratching whatsoever, any stickiness in this valve area, the body's going to have to be replaced. Do not use any abrasive on these Teflon coated aluminum valves. I believe there is an aftermarket oversized valve available when you start to see some wear in this unit, in this area right here. Okay, there are no sealing rings on the input shaft. Okay, there's a seal here that's replaceable, comes in the kit, but the important part is the bushings that ride on the shaft, because if you have worn bushings on this stator, you're going to run a real high risk of having TCC slip codes. So how we're going to test the bushing for wear is the cellophane tape method. We borrowed this method from checking Honda tubes and Honda bushings and the Honda shafts. We use the same type of method here. What we're going to do is put an 1/8-inch wide piece of tape up and down on the input shaft. We don't want to wrap the tape around because that's too thick. So a piece of tape, small piece of tape, as you see here. The tape is about 1.5 thousandths thick. So when we take the stator and slide it down bushing, a proper bushing should jam to a stop. Unless you force it down, it would scrape the tape off of this journal. On the other hand, if you flip the stator over, and it goes down over the tape, the bushings are worn and it will definitely need to get replaced with new bushings. Easy way to check the bushings. Okay, the differential and chain. Obviously, it lifts right up and out of there. You want to make sure these bearings, check these bearings for roughness. Make sure they're nice and clean, ready to go back together. If there's any roughness in them, they obviously got to be replaced. Here's another look at the oil scoop over here before we get to the bearing. There's a serrated edge here. There's its counterpart on the backside fits down into this blind hole right here. These holes that the seals fit in have passages drilled into the case. The flange goes up on this bearing that fits into the drive gear. This would be the output gear for the transmission. The curved part of the bushing bearing, the curved part of the bearing fits nicely down into the pocket right here. Our case parts, just a bearing on top of the drive shell. The other baffle has to come out before we lift the guts up out of the case, and of course the park pawl needs to come out as well. You can see the gear, the park gear on our output chain drive gear. Okay, we got those extra parts out of the way. Now this is a pretty stout snap ring that we're looking at here, so it's going to take a fairly large pry bar to get it out. Excuse me. And this holds the pretty much all the guts down into the case, and the center support as well with the clutch piston housing, I should say. It's not a center support, it's a clutch piston housing, which you'll see here in a little bit. Captures the 1, 2, 3, 4 clutch assembly, and it goes, the flat side of the snap ring goes against the pressure plate. A pretty good picture on your right there, close up of the snap ring properly installed. Okay, and the thing about the 1, 2, 3, 4 clutch, or the forward clutch here, for me, is that, you know, so many times we think of forward clutches as drums with input shafts connected to them, that when the forward clutch applies, it's applied in all forward ranges and drives the gear train. Not anymore with the 6-speed series. The forward clutch is actually now splined to the case and is on in the forward ranges, except 5th and 6th gear. That's all right. So I'm old school. Now that we've got the forward clutches, or the 1, 2, 3, 4 clutches out of the way, we can grab the input shaft and pull the rest of the guts up and out of the case. Now, this will bring up the clutch piston housing that I discussed. This applies the forward down here on the bottom, and this applies the low and reverse. This is splined to the sprag. This is our sprag housing. We'll see in a minute. And that leaves the 2 6 clutches down in the case. Here we have the rest of the parts that are in the case. The steel, the 2 6 steel and cushion plate. Also on the right, we've got the piston, the 2 6 piston, and the return spring and its retaining snap ring. And this snap ring is not a big deal. This Belleville return spring is kind of a softie, so it's quite easy to use a couple of screwdrivers to work that snap ring down into the case. And then lastly, we've got the input shaft support and the input bearing down in the case to come up, and that empties out the case. Now, I'm going to talk about the sealing rings on this input shaft support, because it's so important to renew the rings when we're going through the unit. Of course, they're easy enough to break apart and take them off and throw them in the garbage. Well, getting them back on can be getting back on and getting it fitted can be a bit of a challenge. There's a couple of different methods. The factory tool, which is in the back, 3 pieces on the back, are available. I bought this setup on eBay for about 120 bucks. You can get those on the internet. It's difficult to read the part number on that because it's upside down, The part number is, it's an OTC number 307-578/2. Okay, that's the factory tool, and I'm going to give that to you one more time. That's OTC number 307-578/2. These, you can find them on the internet. And the thing that I like about the way it's easy, the easiness to use these tools, is that the other feature is that these will work on all the six-speed front-wheel drives, 6T, 40, 45, 6T, 70, 6F series 35, and 6F50Ns. It'll work. This is one of the parts in all the series that's the same, and no matter what, is those ceiling rings. The supports are different. So what we're going to do here is you can get that. Okay, so I said 120 bucks, or the alternative is to use a small engine ring compressing tool, and it can be just as effective. Let's see here. I've got a short video demonstrating how these tools work.
Okay, here we have the input shaft support for the 6T40E, and we're going to install new ceiling rings on these. These are solid ceiling rings, so there's a couple different methods, and you can use the scribe to work to snap the ceiling ring down on in here, and then we can use a small ring piston ring compressor that we got at our parts store here. That device, it's effective. It costs about 14 bucks. It's a cheap method to put the rings on there and size them down. The other way to do it is to go out and get the factory tool here, part number 307-578-2, and this was bought on eBay for about 120 bucks. It's a really nice tool. Let's take a look at how that works. This is our sizer tool that you can see we've got it adjusted right to the next ring to be installed. So we're going to take the ring, put it on our tool here. Now this is pretty cool the way this thing works. It's fitted just so that it goes down to the next ring groove, so that we just push it straight on down and it snaps into place. Now we've got our ceiling rings on. Boy, these things are pretty distorted. So we're going to use the sizing tool. We're going to carefully put the ring into the tool, because it takes a little bit of work here, because the ring is so distorted that it'll pop out of the groove. So we might have to help it in there into the groove a little bit. Like I said, that ring really gets distorted. We go through the process here. So we work it down in there. Now it's ready to be used. Let's push it back out here. We've got it all the way down. You can even set this aside while you're building other components. Now we press that back out of there. You can see our rings are in good shape and ready to be installed into the unit.
Okay, so it's two different methods to put the ceiling rings in. It's gonna, if you buy the factory tool, it's something that you're gonna be using quite a bit, because they are building millions of these units. We're gonna see a ton of these things. All right, let's check out the gear train. Our 3.5 reverse and our 4.5/6 housing, input shaft and housing. The reaction sun gear goes over the 3.5 reverse clutches, splines into the reaction planet goes on top of that. Then we have our low and reverse one-way sprag. This is a ratchet type sprag. It does not come apart. I don't think we're going to see these failing much. They look like they're pretty bulletproof. But then again, never say never, right? down to the sun gear, which is splined to the input shaft. The ID groove on the inside of the gear right here faces up always. Then we have the input planet, the output planet, and now we have our, this is, I call it a center support at one time, and it's really, it supports nothing except the housing, the piston housing. So it's a piston housing. And then finally, the output sun gear. So let's take apart the input shaft and the 3.5 reverse 4.5/6 housing. Well, to do that, underneath in the sealing ring bore, we've got to go in there and remove this small snap ring to remove the shaft and the clutch hub. The clutch hub is captured by the shaft. It won't come out independently because of the splines right here. That's where the sun gear splines to, by the way. Okay, the pretty straightforward on removing the 4.5/6 clutch pack and the piston assembly. It's an aluminum piston with seals on the down in the drum here and on the piston. Then we have a balance piston that provides that holds compensator oil or balance oil so that we don't get a centrifugal apply. And to get the 3.5 reverse piston housing apart, we have to flip the drum over and press the housing down to expose the captured snap ring here. But be very careful here that you do not you don't want to press this down too far. It's just enough till it mates, this tab meets the aluminum here, because if you get any heavier on that, it will crack the housing, and it's time to buy a new drum, because these don't think these housings here are available in the aftermarket or from the dealer. We got a molded piston here that we should replace every time, and we can here we can see the two apply areas. This area of the drum is the compensator oil, or compensator oil, balance oil. Thank you. Balance oil, that was what I was trying to think of. And here is the apply oil right here, which seals on the drum to apply the 3.5 reverse clutches. And these are all the same. They might be different sizes in the different transmissions, the 6T, 30, 40, 50, 70, 6F, 35, and 50. The disassembly and assembly of all these drums in all those different models, they may be a different size, but the stack up is always the same. And as always, the clearances on these drums are non-adjustable. GM does, as they have never provided any kind of clearances for these units. They are non-adjustable. Okay. That takes us right up to about 40 minutes, and we look forward to seeing you on July 5th, where I'll go over the reassembly of the unit and the problem areas to keep an eye out for when you're going back together, and we'll be sharing some other technical bulletins as well. So thanks to TransTech for being our sponsor today. I have a short video here, so if you have any questions, type those up during the video or as you see fit, and we'll get those questions answered.
When I use a TransTech kit to rebuild our transmissions, they're not just rebuilt. Those transmissions are fixed, period.
Okay, Julian asked, were the 99 and 2004
4T40E's transmissions as vulnerable to over-overfilling, or are they a bit more forgiving and not getting as hot as these 6T40s? Well, I would have to say, based on the history of those units, we did not see the big burn downs that we've seen in these 6T40 units. So they were, yes, they were a little bit more forgiving. I mean, we still needed to check them at proper operating temperature, but not as exact as these are, because of, and really it all has to do with the synthetic fluid and the difference in the fluids we're using. I hope that answers your question. If there are no further questions, I'd like to thank you for coming. My name is Bill Brayton, and have a great day. Thanks.